Yours, please.
Minister, given all the talk this morning or this afternoon about the low pay commission and the minimum wage and the clearly obvious argument that we are a very low wage economy and that we do have to legislate very carefully to make sure that people don't fall too far below the poverty line, but already workers do, and that there was an attempt here last week to introduce an au pair bill that would prevent those workers having access to the industrial relation machinery of the state. I'm very concerned about certain companies establishing themselves here and practising both paying workers well below the minimum wage and refusing them access to the Labour Relations Commission. And I'm talking in particular about a company called Deliveroo, and I'd like you to respond to how you can regulate that and stop these things happening.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank Deputy Smith for raising this issue. By the way, first of all, can I say I forwarded the details supplied to my department to the Workplace Relations Commission for examination, and if action is needed or if it's appropriate to take action. So I've sent that to the WRC. Can I say first of all as well that the Irish Employment Rights Law makes a distinction between the contract of service, which applies to the employer-employee relationship, and a contract for service, which applies to the case of self-employed persons. Most employment rights legislation does not apply to independent subcontractors, with the exception of the Health and Safety Authority. Ireland has a well-resourced and proactive Labour Inspectorate, which now forms part of the Workplace Relations Commission. There are already existing mechanisms in place to tackle this issue. Inspections are undertaken on the basis of risk analysis, which identifies certain areas of focus. Where the WRC inspection service receives complaints in relation to bogus self-employment or bogus subcontracting, they are forwarded to the Revenue Commissioners and or to the scope section of the Department of Social Protection for investigation, either solely by the person who receives same or jointly with the WRC. In most cases, it will be clear whether an individual is employed or self-employed. Where there is doubt in relation to the employment status of the individual, the relevant department and agencies will have regard to the code of practice for determining employment or self-employment status for individual. And just to say to the Deputy, that code was drawn up and agreed back in 2007 by the relevant government departments with the ICTU and IBEC. The Deputy will be aware that the Department of Finance, the Department of Social Protection have recently conducted a joint public consultation on the use of intermediary-type structures and self-employment arrangements. Clearly, there is a convergence of interest with my department. Apart from the significant losses to the Exchequer, the practice has serious implications for employment rights perspective. In this respect, it is important that individuals who are correctly designated, so that employees are not deprived of employment rights.
Lovely.
This
Thanks,
is particularly in the case of vulnerable workers. Finally, I just want to say this.
Quickly.
I would add that the case highlighted by the Deputy is one example of the changes that are emerging in the world of work. The European Foundation for Working and Living Conditions has identified 9 distinct new forms of employment. The work of Eurofound reflects the common problem at the EU and international level, and it's not just in Ireland.
Okay, appreciate that, Minister. Deputy Smith?
Yeah, well, I want to argue that actually this is a very old form of exploitation, except it's hyper-exploitation, couched in modern facilities such as Facebook and social media as a way of gaining gainful employment. In actual fact, the contract from Deliveroo, and it's quite similar to a contract I've seen in the past from a building company called Rattigan's, determines that if you work for us, you're self-employed, you're not employed. If you work for us, you don't deserve the minimum wage. You are on $4.25 and $4.50 an hour. If you work for us, you have no recourse or access to the WRC, and if any case arises that you attempt to go to the WRC or any other state machinery, such as the Employment Rights Tribunal, Deliveroo is indemnified against any costs or claims that you may make. Deliveroo is a growing company. I have a leaflet here that was distributed around Dunleary last night into every home, not just into restaurants, and it exploits in a high hyperway, not just super, but hyperway, young people, foreign students, very young students in this country. $4.25 an hour is just unacceptable, and not having recourse to the state legislation. Are we back to 1930, or can you give us some guarantees that this will stop?
I need to remind deputies it's inappropriate to name organisations or individuals from outside. Minister, to respond.
Thanks, Carla. Well, I certainly didn't name any company involved here, but I've referred the company to the WRC, as I explained to the Deputy. As I said, there are new forms of employment all over Europe, and it's the problem for Europe, and that's what Eurofound is doing. In relation to, your concern, Deputy, you know, the revenue commissioners are the people that look at the taxation problems that are involved here for these type of workers, and the scope section of the Department of Social Protection, which their one function is to decide one way or the other whether the employee is an employer or an employee. And I think that's important to point out this. I mean, there is a criteria as well, that code of practice we talked about there, in place that decides whether an employee is an employer or an employee. That criteria is there, and we can send it on to you if you want that as well. In relation to the WRC, I said they have a statutory authority to share information with both the revenue and, as I said, the Department of Protection. Just to give you some statistics in relation to this, Deputy, you know, in the case where there are operations, last year in 2015, joint operations that took place between both the Department and the Revenue were 575, and in 2014 that was 353. So there has been a lot more inspections have taken place.
Thanks, Minister.
And of course, as you rightly point out, a lot of that happens in the food and hospitality. But there are 56 inspectors with the WRC to carry out this work, and I'm satisfied that they have the resources to do so.
For frustrating your efforts there. Deputy Smith, briefly. Yeah.
Inspectorates. Not that long ago, when there were more dog wardens in the country than there were labour inspectorates, and I worked for a union tutoring on labour law, and one of the things we were acutely aware of was the lack of resources to have places inspected. And just to say, because I don't want to take up your time, I feel we have to go a bit further with this, and we need a mechanism in labour law which will insist that a watchdog, such as the WRC, if they receive enough complaints from the public, can then issue a thorough investigation into the activities of any company like the ones that I've mentioned, in terms of the level of exploitation, hyper-exploitation of young people. And if we let this happen, why would we not have all bus drivers on self-employed contracts, all teachers on self-employed contracts, all nurses on self-employed contracts? We're hurtling in that direction if we don't stop it.
Terrific. Thank you. Minister, for response. Yeah, you have a minute.
I want to say again, you know, this is a problem that's been faced not just in Ireland, Deputy, it's all over Europe, and that's why Eurofound are looking at this. I mean, there's employee sharing, there's job sharing, interim management, casual work, ICT-based mobile work, voucher-based work, portfolio work, crowd employment, collective employment, and it is a problem in the EU and at international level as well, and it's something that they're working on. But I'm satisfied that the WRC are doing their job. They have the resources, as I said previously here in this debate, where problems that were used to take 2 years to solve are now solved in 3 weeks. So they have the resources, they have the manpower, and I think we should let the WRC do their job with the assistance of the Department of Social Protection, the Revenue Commissioners. They all share information together, and they do carry out, as I said, joint operations and inspections, and that exercise is extremely important, and it does uncover a lot of non-compliance in the areas that we have mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much.